Good afternoon. I'm Pastor Tim Holscher, and if you are here for the Greek class, you're at the right place. Um, yes, the Greek class actually was yesterday, but we, for some reason, had a problem streaming it and weren't for sure exactly what happened. So I am going over that class for those of you that are following along and weren't able to join us yesterday because the streaming didn't work. And then I'm just going to add one other note on this. If I stumble at times as I'm going through and teaching this, I'm not a Greek scholar, but I have took my first Greek class in 1983 and took Greek all then through, and that was in college, and then in seminary, took Greek every semester. And in the seminary program I went through, I was really great because even in the theology and in the Bible classes, if you were in the New Testament, we were working the Greek text. And I made a habit, and I encourage you to do this. If you're a Greek student, you may not be able to do this at beginning Greek, but is that if you are in a Bible study, in listening to a pastor teach at church or somebody teaching at your church, whatever it might be, or you're taking classes somewhere at a Bible college or a seminary, is to put your English text away. Don't, this isn't the one I used. This is Alfred Marshall Interlinear. I had a different version of this, but I used the King James version when I went through seminary, just because that's all I could find. This is New American Standard. This is the preaching one I use on Sundays. And I only say I use this just because I can default to English for smooth reading for everybody else following along, but then I can reference the Greek in there. But what I'm saying is I would suggest putting that away and learning to follow along in a Greek text. I did that my first year in seminary, not right off the bat. I think I might have been into my second semester, but I decided if I was going to get the Greek, I needed to follow along in Greek. So I'm just encouraging you with that. Having said all that, and having told you I'm not a Greek scholar, I have taught Greek many times over the last 30 years. Have taught from individuals that I've tutored all the way up to some small classes at our church here. And I think that we can introduce you to Greek. I think we can take you on so that you can start to gain some proficiency eventually. And so I hope it's helpful, because I realize that there's a lot of other people that are teaching Greek online, and they're doing a really good job. One of the reasons that we offer it as a class at our church once in a while is I think it's good for people to be able to have somebody they can actually ask a question immediately there in person, if possible, or through Zoom, which we've been using started learning to use due to the COVID thing last March. But it gives people the opportunity to interact. And I think interaction with a teacher is sometimes better than just sitting and listening to somebody speak, which is what you're doing if you're on YouTube, but you can always message me down below if you have some questions. I'm in lesson number 3, and I am going through, and I've been talking to you about this, the essentials of the Greek New Testament by Ray Summers. I realize for some people, they consider this to be old school, and there's a lot of updated versions of other material that people are using. I still like this because I like the simplicity of it. And I like just kind of there's a lot of other things that you can learn in the process of learning Greek. And I'm going to be touching on a few of those things, but I think people that are first learning Greek, they get a little overwhelmed with all that other stuff. This actually is the version of Summers that I actually was given a copy of this when I graduated from high school, so even longer ago. Didn't use this when I was in college. We used Machen in college, but I used this when I was after graduated from high school. And it's the same as this largely, except that this has been updated, given some more material in it. And this is the text that I would recommend that you get, that you can find some old hardcover copies, but you can also find this in paperback. And then just again to reiterate that there is a workbook with this, and I have used the workbook also by Stephen Cox, and I recommend that. I still find them helpful, and I think if a person actually does the work, I really think just about anybody, if you just do the work on any language like this, and Greek's one of them, you can learn it. It just takes you putting in some time with that. And if anybody tries to sell you on the fact that they've got an easy way to learn Greek, they're lying. Because whenever you, and I'm not saying this is hard, I'm just saying it takes some time and it takes some dedication in that regard. So I'm just always trying to encourage that. And if you are still still just getting started with this and you don't have a copy of the textbook yet, I'm kind of reproducing a little bit of an outline from the textbook, primarily for you just to follow along with me if you're online. And you can find that outline, which I'm regularly trying to update, at graceteaching.net. And you can look under resources and you'll find a PDF of the outline that I'm using. Okay, so having said all that, we're going to get into the verb, and you don't need to see me anymore. So I'm going to switch over to share my screen so that you can see what we're going to be looking at today. We're moving into lesson number 3 on here. And again, I would encourage you, if you're still starting, to go back here. If you need to practice vocabulary, or excuse me, not vocabulary, but practice the alphabet, I've got an alphabet chart here that I think would be helpful for you to look at. And so you can come back over here to this alphabet chart, and you'll be able to see the different material, the different aspects of the alphabet, the different letters. And what I suggested for you to do is to write the letter and then the English equivalent and say it out loud. Alpha and then A, sounds like A, and so on and so forth. And the pronunciation guide for that is over here. These are the names of the letters, remember, and this is the pronunciation in this column, and that is on page 4 on that outline. So you can look at that. But I would still practice this way back, like I said, right after I graduated from high school. I did this just on lined notebook paper, and I did this for 3 or 4 days, just for 10 minutes or so every morning before I had to go to work. And after a little while, guess what? I had the alphabet down. It was actually pretty easy. And if you have the alphabet down, then you can start working on learning some words and practice pronouncing words and such. And I've got some examples of those there. So that's just going back and reviewing what we have there. We had some vocabulary because we have vocabulary introduced in our textbook in lesson number 2. And here is the vocabulary. I'm going to go over those with you very quickly just for practice. The first vocabulary word meaning I lead is ago. I hear is akuo. I see or I glance at is blepo. I have echo. I loose or I destroy, luo. Those are all verbs, by the way, if you couldn't figure that out. And I'm trying to be helpful and remind you, just in case it's been a while since you've studied a language, a verb is something that is expressing action. Okay, so verbs. Come over here and we have a column of nouns that are introduced in here. This letter at the end of each one of these is the nominative, singular, definite article. We would say the, which is why I put it at the end. And we're doing that because it helps indicate the gender that we have here. But all these are the same gender. They're all masculine. We haven't got into that you don't need to memorize that. I'm just trying to expose you to what we have. First word we have, and when we have 2 gammas together like this, and let me blow this up just a little bit bigger for you here. There we go. When we have 2 gammas here, you can see where my cursor is. That is an angelos. So it's an NG sound when we have 2 gammas together. So that's angelos. And this would be, we get the word angel from this, a messenger or an angel. Adelphos, which is brother, the brother. Doulos, which is a slave or a servant. karpos, fruit, and logos, word. Now, each, if you notice at the beginning of these letters, these are vowels. The alpha is a vowel, al's a vowel, the rest of these are consonants. And if you remember, every word that begins with a vowel will always have a breathing mark over it, always have a breathing mark. And so if we look down here below, just by way of review, smooth breathing mark looks like an asterisk, but it curves away from the word, curves out in front of the word, away. So it's like a mouth looking away. And that's a smooth breathing mark. So you're just going to say angelos, adelphos. But when we have a rough breathing mark, which we have over the definite article, that rough breathing mark, which looks like a asterisk or a open mouth facing the word, my wife likes to say like an open mouth. That's a good way to think of it. Then you say ha, like an H sound. So it's ha. So this would be ha, 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 ha. Okay. So ha, angelos, ha, adelphos, ha, doulos, and so on and so forth. We have them over here. Echo, it's just straight because they're smooth breathing marks. So again, we're just reviewing. We have these breathing marks that are necessary. We also talked about accents, and even though the textbook I'm using teaches accents, teaches the principles of putting accents on verbs, and I think it's a good thing for you to be aware of how the accents work. I don't think you need to focus on them. I made reference to 2 books, HPV Noon's Elements of New Testament Greek, and then one of the modern versions of that, editions, almost a completely new book, but kind of follows the structure by Jeremy Duff. And there was one edition in between, they don't really emphasize accents a lot because we're not exactly for sure how the accents caused us to pronounce the words. We think we know, but we don't know for sure. So I wouldn't stress over it a lot. And for the most part, the accents aren't dramatically going to change the way that you and I understand the word. Now let's go to lesson 3. This is a word, and we're going to introduce this. We're not going to go through all of this lesson today, but we're going to introduce the verb. But we're going to start with some vocabulary. All of our vocabulary today are verbs. They're all verbs. And so we have gnosko. And that gnosko is I know experientially. I know not everybody would agree with that, but I'm putting that emphasis on it because personally, having gone through and done a thorough study on the different New Testament words for knowledge, I'm convinced that there is a distinction in this in most of the texts anyway. But that's just to understand, that's my conclusion. Then the next word we have is grapho, which means I write. And if you're always, if you're trying to look for mnemonic devices, things to help you remember words, I think if you just practice these, and again, there's an app that you can get, I'm assuming for Android, but I'm an iPhone person, that you can get on the iPhone at least, and it's by New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary. And they have vocabulary words or flashcards, and it's free. And you can create your own deck there by tapping to create your own. And you can go through their list of words. I'm just going to tell you, you have to be persistent because some of their words do not occur in alphabetical order. And I don't know why. There may be some logic to why they occur the way they do. They are in the alphabetical order, but like the second letter may not be. So you can find these. And it's a good app for practicing this. When I took Greek, both in college and in seminary, we were probably adding, I'm going to guess 20 vocabulary words a week. I'm probably wrong on that. It might have been more, but so you always had a stack of vocabulary cards in your pocket. You went to work and you pulled them out if you had a brief moment, sat down at break or something, and you were flipping through vocabulary cards, reminding yourself. But there are mnemonic devices that are also helpful. And so gnosko, I was talking to my wife, you can say, gnosko. Maybe that's really lame, but that might help. Grapho, I think, is easier because we think of graphite. You have graphite in a pencil that you use to write, or you write a graph. So graphics involve things that are written, drawn, and designed. So I write. Didasco is I teach. And some of you might have heard, there was a book in the 2nd century called the Didache, and it's the noun version. It was teaching is what it was. And maybe some of you have heard that before. Egeiro, I raise up. It is one of the words that's used with regard to the resurrection. It's not exclusively the resurrection, but in many occurrences it is. Egeiro, I raise up. And the reason we're saying I is you'll eventually see the ending on all of this is telling you that I am the one that's doing it. The person speaking or writing is saying that they are doing this. Fellow, I wish or I desire. Lambano, I take or receive. Lambano, I take or receive. Lego, I say or I speak. Pempo, I send. Pharaoh, I bear, I bring, carry. I bear, I bring, I carry. Now, I taught Greek to an individual several years ago, and that individual had a summer job where they were busy operating machinery all summer, and they were trying to come up with places to figure out how to practice their vocabulary. And this is just, again, a suggestion, is that if you can take your phone and you can record you're saying these things, gnosko, and then I know, grapho, I write, put your headphones in while you're working. If that's something that's allowed, don't break any rules where you are. And then you can listen. You can, off your phone, listen to the vocabulary, even if you don't have time to actually be looking at something. And that's what this friend did. Well, this friend was operating machinery, would then listen to the pronunciation of the words and then the English translation or gloss of each word. So now let's look at the Greek verb itself. Greek verb. A verb has tense, voice, mood, person, and number. Most of us kind of probably think we know something about tense from English. Greek tense is a little different, and we'll talk about that. Voice is going to talk about how the subject is related to the action. Are they performing it, or is it being done to them? And so I have just a comment down here in a couple of lines. I always picture that if I throw a ball, that's active. I throw the ball. But passive, which we have in English, could be I'm at the pool and somebody else comes along, picks me up, and I am thrown. Somebody throws me into the pool. But we also, if you don't have anybody else to throw the ball with, then you might want to throw the ball to yourself. So you might toss it up in the air and play catch with yourself. And that would be a middle voice, something we don't really have in English, but the Greek has it. There's some personal interest involved. You might be doing it for your own interest, or you might be doing it to yourself, bouncing it off a wall, something like that. Then the Greek verb also has mood. Now, mood tells us whether an action is real, that would be indicative, or whether it's possible. Possible means subjunctive, imperative, or optative. And each one of those is a certain degree of possibility. And you only have to worry at the present time about learning the indicative, because this is what we're going to be working on for just a little while. And then we have person. Person is going to be first person, I or we, whether you're singular or plural. And that's what the number is about, singular or plural. The second one is being, talking about the person is being spoken to. So we would say you, I'm speaking to you. If you spoke Old English, like was represented in the King James Bible, you had thee and thou for the singular, and you for the plural. Okay. Modern English, we only have you, and it does double duty. If you are truly from some places in the South, you understand they say y'all when they're referring to more than one person. They're looking at more than one person. I had a friend once from the South that used to tell me that he always could tell somebody faking that they were from the South versus a person that genuinely was, because they would say y'all when they're talking to one person. And generally that was not true. And then the third one is somebody that is being spoken about. So you're talking to somebody else, but you're talking about another person, a third person. And that would be he, she, it, or they, if it's plural. So that's person. Okay. So and then we have number, singular or plural. So almost every verb then is going to have these. Voice, not every verb is going to have voice. There are some verb forms that especially some stative verbs that do not use voice generally. But the rest of them, they're going to have tense, they're going to have voice, mood, person, and number. Now, I kind of waited for this on tense here because there are two aspects of tense. And when I took beginning Greek in college, we only learned that tense had to do with time. Now, there may have been more said about tense, and I failed to pay attention in class. That's always a possibility. I wish I had my notes from college, but somehow or another, I've misplaced them in almost the last 40 some years. But when I went to seminary and we started off learning Greek grammar and syntax, we worked from a textbook called The Manual Grammar of the Greek New Testament by H.E. Dana and Julius R. Manti. And when they introduced tense, I still remember this was a revelation to me when we started into tense in seminary, that the action, and I'm quoting from Dana and Manti, action is presented in the expression of a verbal idea, involves two elements, time of action and kind of action. But as they go on, they say kind of action is the chief idea involved. Time is but a minor consideration in Greek tenses. And one of the things that was emphasized a great deal when I went through seminary is time is nearly always determined chiefly by context. Time is chiefly determined by context, not specifically form. And I think that just let you know that. You don't have to memorize that, but just don't be surprised if, as you're learning some of these things and you're exposed to some different places, that you're going to find some places where a word in the present tense doesn't seem to be talking about the present tense, and you're wondering what's happening. Let me share with you an example of this. I want to share. Here we go. I'm going to go to Matthew chapter 26, and you won't recognize that. We're going to look at a verb here. I have the Net Bible pulled up over here on the right side, the Greek text over here. This is the verb that we're going to consider. It's a Greek verb, paradidomi. You don't need to worry about that right now, other than to know that it is, I don't know if that you can pull that up and you can see that, but it is a present middle indicative verb. Okay, it's a present middle indicative verb. And so in the present tense, if we come over here and read verse 2 in the HCSB, it says, this is Jesus speaking, that after 2 days, the Passover is coming and the Son of Man, he's referring to himself, will be handed over to be crucified. Now, this is a present tense, and the Net Bible translates it will be handed over, which that's future. And I don't think the Net Bible's wrong. The Net Bible is this. Jesus is kind of looking at it that this is what's going to happen, but it is so certain that he's going to be handed over, so certain that he's going to be betrayed, that he speaks of it in a present tense to indicate the absolute certainty of this situation that is coming here. And what does he say? 2 days. 2 days is the Passover, and they're going to be up there, and this is what's going to transpire. In Matthew chapter 3, in verse 1, it says, in those days. Now, so that's clearly, in those days is looking back to the past, right? So Matthew's looking back. It says, John the Baptist came into the wilderness. And the word here, came, is a present middle indicative again. So it's saying that he is coming, we'd say. So in those days, John is coming. And so it's looking at something past now, but again, it's describing it in vividness. And I think most of you probably get that. You're telling a story to somebody and you're saying, hey, back when I was in college, I remember this day that we all came into the classroom and we're waiting for our biology professor to show up. I remember this happened to me once. Waiting for our biology professor to show up. And we're sitting there in the lecture hall and the door opens and he comes riding in. And the door opens, present tense. He comes, present tense. Riding, present tense. Comes riding in on his bicycle with all of his bicycle garb and everything like that. And you're all kind of like, wow. See, so sometimes we speak of past events from our perspective. We're trying to draw you into our perspective that, hey, I want you to see this picture the way I see it in my mind of the way this transpires. And so you're bringing them to your perspective in this situation. And I think I have one more. Yes, in Matthew chapter 4. Now in Matthew chapter 4, and let me pull up. I want to pull up an English translation so you can see this on the side. This is at a time that Jesus is being tempted by the devil. And if you look at it in the context, again, Matthew introduces this as an act that happened in the past. But as he speaks about it, as something happened in the past, he says, then the devil took him. And we have paralambano, and this is one of our vocabulary words is this last part, para. You haven't learned the para part of this. It's just another form of different version of lambano, but you know this lambanai. So this is one that you will eventually learn here today. And it's a present active indicative. And it says, so in vividness, as Matthew's writing, he says, the devil takes him into a holy mountain. And he stands him up there. And then we have down here, and he says to him, and notice the Net Bible, they translate it, took him, said, because they're representing, even though Matthew is writing with present tense verbs, they're giving us the past tense essence, which I don't fault them for. I'm just trying to help you see that these are in reality, they're present tenses, but it's present tense as Matthew's drawing you into this what he's trying to bring you down into this picture of what happened. Now, this might be helpful, and let me switch back over to our other screen. And I have, there we go. I've borrowed this from another source. I think from the Reformed Theological Seminary in Orlando. I think it was one of their teachers that actually put up something similar to this. And I thought, oh, this is a good way to present this material. Now, when you're looking at it from a time aspect, we understand past time, present time, future time. But there's also the way that you can look at it in terms of what it popularly is called aspect today, where you're looking at the kind of action and you're looking at the speaker or the writer's perspective. So the perfective aspect is you're simply looking at this action, start to finish, it's transpired. However you're seeing it, you're just seeing the action as a whole, taking it all in is the way you're looking at it. But there's also the imperfective, where you're actually stepping into the action and you're giving then your listeners or your readers this picture of what's going on. And if you consider this man standing here, the way that sometimes people portray this is it's like the difference between, and you maybe don't see it here because he's standing down below, but if you put him up above, put him in a helicopter is the way I've heard people describe this, and he's up above watching a parade, and he sees the parade from beginning to end from that perspective. He sees the whole thing. Whereas here we have the speaker or the writer standing down on the sidewalk as the parade's going by, and he can see a little ways to his right and a little ways to his left, but he's seeing the parade passing by, and you're drawing it in, saying, now I see the band going by, and I see them playing, and so on and so forth. And so there's this aspect where you're looking at something that is, it's incomplete, and it may be incomplete in the past. It may be incomplete in the future. It may be ongoing. You're seeing just the fact that this is ongoing at this time, or you could be taking in the whole action, looking at it, something maybe in the past, might even see something at times. You're just simply looking at an act in the future. And so I'm not trying to complicate this up front. I'm just helping you see that, boy, it was really shocking to get to seminary and realize that tense in terms of time really does not tell the whole story about a verb. You're learning to always view it primarily in terms of the kind of activity that's going on, and that time and kind are a combination of context as well as the form of the verbs. Now, please don't be scared off as I say this. I'm just introducing you, just trying to help you see that there's going to be a lot more that goes on with this. And I think most of this is actually fairly obvious when you start to learn these different forms. Okay, so let's go back up here, and I'm just going to introduce to you the personal endings. Up here, if you remember, all these were I, because they all have this omega that ends, and in the present active indicative, which is the form we're looking at, that omega is indicating that we're talking about an I. So every verb then has a stem. So for the verb luo, the stem would be this lu, the lambda upsilon, and then you have a personal ending. And these are the 6 personal endings for the present active indicative. Now, why 6? Because it might be I, or it might be we. It might be you as one individual, or it might be you as a group of individuals I'm speaking to. It might be he, she, or it that I'm talking about, or it might be they that I'm talking about. And so the Greek verb has these personal endings that tells you who's involved. And if we put these together, let's take our word Lego that we have up here. Lego, I could say Lego, I speak, or I am speaking, or legais, you speak. Legai, she speaks. Legamen, we speak. Legate, you speak. And legusi, and we have this movable noon on the end, that this is the ending, but sometimes if you have a vowel in the next word, and my wife really pointed this out well, we put an N after the indefinite article in Greek if we have a noun that it modifies, or that it is telling you that it's indefinite, that begins with a vowel. So we don't say a anchovy, we would say an anchovy. And so something similar in Greek. So usi or usin would be they. So legusi or legusin, they are speaking. They are speaking. Now, I was learning Greek in seminary. I was supposed to have some of this Greek down well, because we're actually moved on to grammar, where we're talking about the interpretation of the different tenses and the different cases and so on and so forth, how we understand these. And I was struggling a little bit to try to keep up at times. And one of my friends in the class that had taken Greek quite a few years ahead of me was sitting in auditing that class, and we came to a verb form, and I remember the professor asked a question about that, and I'm always trying to answer these even if he's not asking me, and my friend just says, "Oh, O ice I amen eta usi. Now I think he was trying to help me when he did this because he knew that I was trying to struggle to figure out some of these forms as we were going through this. And he goes, O ice I amen eta usi, my et die metha esta antai, on es amen eta on. And what he's doing is he's taking these endings, 6 endings for each of these tenses, and he's putting together as a package. So down here, O ice I amen eta usi. Now that'd be the English pronunciation. But this is what I recommend for you when you're learning this. I recommend memorizing and reciting this paradigm. Present, active, indicative. O ice I amen eta usi. And then there'll be some other paradigms eventually we will learn. Okay. But I think that if you learn to do those as a package and just be able to rattle those off, and you have an order in your mind for what each one of those represents, and you go through it in an organized manner, that once in a while, when you come across an ending and maybe you're unfamiliar with it, you haven't tackled it for a while, you look at it and you're going to be able to rattle through these, and you're going to go, oh, that's and be able to identify the form, and then that whatever, whether you're looking at an aorist passive indicative or an aorist passive subjunctive or something like this, you'll be able to go, oh, that's what this is. And you'll recognize that. Again, I don't want you to be overwhelmed. This is the only one you have to memorize right now. There'll be others to memorize, but if you learn them as packages, it's not bad. O ice I amen eta usi. O ice I amen eta usi. Present active indicative. O ice I amen eta usi. I hope that's helpful. I hope that's helpful. Now, that's all the further we're going today. We're going to come back. We're going to look next week at some other things with regard to the verb. We'll review some of this material just to see how everybody's doing and talk about that. But your assignment, if you have the Cox workbook, I would work through those things. But your assignment is to review the vocabulary words from lesson 3, as well as the vocabulary words back here from lesson 2. And then practice these endings. O ice I amen eta usi. And try taking the verbs and putting these endings on each verb, replacing up here, replacing the omega at the end with the others, and then representing what it would say. I speak, you, and so on and so forth, depending on what the verb is that you're using. So thelais, I wish. Gairais, or you race up. I didn't even say that right. I'm sorry. Thelais, you wish, and so on and so forth. And I would encourage that. So I hope this is helpful as we're working through this. And again, you're going to, no matter how well or poorly I might teach this, you're going to get out of it what you put into it in terms of putting in some time practicing these things on your own. And I would encourage you to do so, because the use of the Greek Testament, I think, is invaluable for believers as we study the Word of God. I don't think there's a day that goes by that I don't access the Greek Testament. If I wake up in the night and I can't sleep, I pull my iPad down from the top of my headboard, and whatever texts I might be working through at that time for Bible studies, I go and I read them, and I read them in the Greek. I don't read them in English. I normally read them in the Greek. Just again and it's amazing. Sometimes you've read stuff before and you pick up new things, but it's, you can do this. You can do this. Hey, if I could learn Greek, you can learn Greek. I am not a scholar. I am just a Christian that has learned this and trust that it's beneficial to you. Thank you for joining me today, and hope if everything works out all right, we will see you on Tuesday.